Listen to me, Dipper. This town is a magnet for things that are special, and that includes you and me. Stay here with me, Dipper. Become my apprentice. Don't let anyone hold you.
Well, time to shatter expectations once again. Hi, I'm Kitty Monk, here to talk to you about Gravity Falls, or more specifically, Dipper Pines. And one topic I think needs more discussion. Also, sorry if there's been a string of shorter than normal videos as of recent. I'm at that point of the semester where you start to think, you know what, on second thought, maybe stripping isn't that bad of a career choice. I mean, I want to be an English teacher, but both are very important professions. You get decent tips, you work good hours, and there's no graduate school. Plus, I have a lot of bigger projects in mind. I'm really trying to finish writing a script for Tom, and also for a few other shows I have yet to get to, or haven't gotten to in a while. Writer's block is rearing its ugly head. I have wanted to make a video on Dipper for a long time, but I don't exactly know what to say. Dipper is one of the main characters, but he's kind of like Seinfeld, where while he obviously has his own character, he mostly bounces off the rest of the cast. If I talk about, say, him and Wendy or him Pacifica, that's gonna take up most of the video, and I already have videos planned for both girls. And what else could I say about Dipper? That Mabel took advantage of him? That his real name is Mason? That his voice actor was in Skylanders?
But I have an inescapable urge to take up 2 parking spaces at once.
Dang! He truly is evil now!
He actually was, look it up. And check out Skylanders Academy. It's surprisingly good. But for the past couple of weeks, I've also wanted to make a video on one of the show's most controversial subplots. So how do you kill 2 birds with 1 stone?
Like this. The key to that is big rock, small birds.
Yeah, we're doing this. Guys, let's ask ourselves a question. Should Dipper have accepted the apprenticeship with Ford? And was he wrong to refuse it? I did sort of give my 2 cents when I made my Mabel video, but I think I can go more in depth here. In that instance, I mentioned it mostly in relation to Mabel herself, and how Dipper's decision affected her.
This is a huge opportunity for me.
Well, it's a horrible opportunity for me!
Now it's time to discuss how this impacted Dipper himself, negatively or otherwise. So let's discuss. One of the main characters of Gravity Falls is Dipper Pines. Obviously that's not his real name. His parents weren't being creative. They call him that because of his birthmark.
That's how you got your nickname. I thought your parents just hated you or something.
Dipper is a smart yet cautious child, and unlike Mabel, he doesn't exactly like spending his summer in Gravity Falls.
But I was having a hard time getting used to our new surroundings.
Boom!
He also doesn't exactly fit in with his peers, and just wants to get adolescence over with. At home, and even in Gravity Falls, Dipper is made fun of for his intellect, which has caused him to become extremely insecure. Wait, why is it that in cartoons, the honor students are always the ones who get made fun of? In my experience, the smart kids are the popular ones. In the first episode, Dipper discovers a journal belonging to an unknown author. And yes, I said a journal this time, not 3. Hey, I read every comment I get. Throughout the rest of the series, Dipper uses the journal to research the town, along with adding revisions of his own. For example, when he first finds the journal, he reads a section about gnomes, but the journal has nothing about how to stop them. After the gnomes try to kidnap and forcibly marry Mabel, the twins learn that because they're small and scrawny, a simple leaf blower can do the trick.
Wanna do the honors?
On 3.
1, 2, 3!
So he adds it for further reference. In the episode, Not What He Seems, Dipper finally gets to meet the author, who turns out to be his great uncle Ford, Stan's twin brother. Actually, that's always perplexed me. There are times when they call Ford Grunkle, like they do Stan,
Grunkle Ford!
but he's almost always Great Uncle Ford.
Great Uncle Ford! Great Uncle Ford! Great Uncle Ford!
Even Mabel calls him that.
Great Uncle Stanford!
Is it because they barely know him, or because Ford just prefers to be called Great Uncle? I was trying to save Ford's backstory for a separate video, like maybe one about how much I love his character, or one about if he was wrong to cut off Stanley. However, because of how much his character mirrors Dipper, I should give a brief rundown here. Turns out that like his nephew, Ford's twin brother was his best friend, and on top of that, he was made fun of by the other kids. Only it wasn't just for his mind, but because he was born with 6 fingers. This, combined with having a dad who was never impressed with anything,
I'm not impressed.
led to Ford growing up to have a massive Peggy Hill complex. Basically, he's super insecure, but he takes great pride in his accomplishments, and has become arrogant to sort of compensate. Doesn't exactly mean he's a bad guy, but he never looks back. And this has cost him many friendships, and it's also made him a prime target for flattery. After an argument with Stan that cost Ford his dream college, their father kicked Stan out of the house, while he was still a high school senior.
And until you make us a fortune, you're not welcome in this household.
What?
Yeah, way to go, Daddy Pines. As a result, Ford ended up at the worst college possible. It was worse than those for-profit colleges you see on bus benches. He had to go to a safety school.
I know Backup's More wasn't anyone's first choice, but what we lack in prestige, we make up for in mostly bug-free dorms.
Hope he got used to the dorms that don't have air conditioning and the way too expensive student parking. But Ford knew an opportunity when he saw one, so he kept studying. Eventually, he got recognized enough to receive a grant, which he decided to use to study the paranormal. To keep track, he put his findings in a series of journals.
The journals!
Sorry, just got excited there about the journals.
After meeting Bill Cipher, he worked on a long-term project, a gateway to other worlds. Soon he realized he was about to bring on the apocalypse, and also cause the mental decline of his partner, but why would that matter to a genius like him? He hit the journals around town and called Stan for the first time in years.
Take this book, get on a boat, and sail as far away as you can, to the edge of the earth. Bury it where no one can find it.
Is it weird I got why Ford didn't destroy the journal? I write in my spare time, and after a certain point, your journal, computer, whatever, basically becomes your baby. You can't burn a baby. You can't drown it in a swimming pool. It can't just live on in your memories. An argument, and then a fight ensued, and Ford was stranded in the multiverse for the next 30 years, while Stan took over his identity, and tried as hard as he could to bring his brother home, working the Mystery Shack during the day, and on the portal at night. In season 2, and one of the most emotionally charged episodes of the whole show, Ford gets free. While he's happy for the help, he makes it known he wants little to do with the Pines family. Not that he hates them, he's actually thrilled to learn he has nibblings.
I have a niece and nephew?
But to him, they're just distractions, and he thinks the isolation is the only way he can protect them from Bill.
On the dark, weird road I travel, I'm afraid you cannot follow.
Plus, if you ask me, Ford is just one of those people who generally prefers having his own company and being alone, because being social is like having all your blood sucked out by a mosquito vampire. In addition, Dipper and Mabel are leaving in a few weeks, so no reason to get attached to his newfound nibblings. By mistake, Dipper wanders downstairs, and the pair find they have plenty in common.
My work is far too dangerous for a single living soul to spend— Wait! Is that a 38-sided die from Dungeons, Dungeons, and More Dungeons?
Yeah!
Ford sees a younger version of himself in his nephew, and he decides to cultivate it by spending time with him one-on-one. He's also impressed when he learns Dipper not only had encounters with the various creatures of the town, but that he's defeated Bill Cipher more than once, Ford's mortal enemy. If you ask me, possibly his ex-boyfriend. I'm sorry, but moments like this practically scream, we used to have a thing going.
Stanford Philbrick Pines, my old pal.
You two need a bone.
I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have done that. In the episode, Dipper and Mabel versus the future, Ford asks Dipper to go with him to a UFO in order to fix the rift, because if it gets broken— According to Ford, the ship is a special place. It's where he and McGucket got the parts to make the first portal, and he theorizes it's the reason Gravity Falls is so weird. While they try to find adhesive, Ford takes the chance to ask Dipper important questions, like what he wants out of life, or what he wants to do in the future.
If you're so sure of what you want out of life, why wait? Why put up with the drudgery of school?
Trust me, I'd love to fast forward the whole thing, but it's not like I have a choice.
Ford says he thinks Dipper was born for more than his provincial life.
I'm getting too old to investigate Gravity Falls on my own. I need to train an apprentice, and I think I'd like to keep it in the family.
Basically, Ford wants to pull Dipper out of school, take him under his wing, and train him to be his successor.
What would you say to staying in Gravity Falls after the summer ends and becoming my apprentice?
Only, there's a catch. This offer is only open to Dipper. Mabel will have to go home without him. Naturally, his first instinct goes to his sister.
There's also Mabel. She'd be all alone in California.
While it should be noted Ford is obviously projecting onto Dipper,
We've never really been apart before.
And isn't it suffocating?
he does make it clear he thinks very highly of Mabel, and isn't doing this to be malicious.
Mabel will be fine on her own. She has a magnetic personality.
Again, that I do kinda like. It's more realistic, and it makes it harder to argue Ford is a bad guy, just an anti-hero. Didn't the Owl House do something similar with Gwen? I really gotta get back into that show. Dipper doesn't know what to think, at least until he rescues Ford from the ship's security system. Believing he can do stuff like this every single day, he agrees. Now this revelation absolutely wrecks Mabel. Throughout the episode, she's had one of the worst days possible. Her innocence is shattered like a priceless Ming vase. High school will suck. Being 13 comes with a whole new set of problems.
Classes get super hard, your body just flat out turns against you, and worst of all, everybody hates you.
Mabel, be happy that this is 2015 and not 2022, because nowadays we could mention Aunt Flo. And Candy and Grenda will be away during the last few weeks of summer. Throughout this, Stan tries to reassure her that as bad as it gets, she'll always have somebody to count on, as Dipper will be by her side through thick and thin. And then, she hears Dipper through the walkie-talkie she left him earlier. When he returns home, Mabel confronts him.
Tell me it's not true, Dipper. Tell me you were joking. Ford's Apprentice? Seriously?
Dipper tries to argue how great of an opportunity this is, and just a natural part of life.
Look, things aren't gonna stay frozen this way. It's part of growing up. Things change. Summer ends.
But Mabel, in a state of despair, runs off into the woods to sob, accidentally taking the bag containing the rift. There, she's conned by Bill Cipher into unleashing Weirdmageddon and getting trapped in her bubble. A couple episodes later, and one of the most contentious episodes of the whole show, Sue's Dipper and Wendy try to release her, but she refuses to go with them, not wanting to deal with the reality outside. While on trial, Dipper understands that she's scared of growing up, and that's why she isn't fighting back. In order to get her to leave, Dipper tells Mabel he'll reject the offer. That way, she won't be alone.
Mabel, I thought you were living a fantasy, but look at me. I actually thought I was gonna stay here and be Ford's apprentice. How ridiculous is that?
And it works. After Mabel comes to her senses, she does tell Dipper he doesn't have to say no because of her.
I appreciate what you said back there, but if you want to take Ford's apprenticeship, I won't get in your way.
Miss out on your awkward teen years?
As a result, the show ends with both of the twins returning home, waiting until next summer to return to Gravity Falls. Now, once again, the question becomes, should Dipper have accepted? You might not like my answer, but I think he should have said no. Please don't hurt me, I bruise easily. Oh no, the angry mob is forming.
Cotton candy! Get your cotton candy! It's alright, that cotton candy!
Let me rephrase it. If Dipper was older, like about to graduate high school, okay, go ahead. If that was the case, he could have done it as an internship or a gap year. I will concede that on paper, this is a great opportunity, but given Dipper's age and several other factors I'm about to name, this is a bad idea when you really start to think about it. But before I go into my little diatribe, let's remove two factors from the equation, Mr. and Mrs. Pines. I know some people say, oh well, Dipper never asked his mom and dad. Of course, if Mabel said something, they would say no, but since the show hand waves them away.
Dipper, I have 12 PhDs. Your parents would be thrilled I could give you such an advanced education.
I will too. Let's pretend that in this scenario, Dipper's parents are perfectly fine with their son apprenticing under his uncle, great uncle, whatever he's called. So let's get into it. For one, the biggest reason I think he should have refused is I don't exactly think Ford is the best caregiver.
I haven't been in this dimension for a while. It's okay to give children weapons, right?
Psh, come on, dog.
I mean, maybe you could trust him with your kid while you go see a movie, or maybe even if you want to get away for the weekend, but definitely for no more than 72 hours. Then there's also the issue of money. I don't think anybody pointed it out, but Ford only afforded to live the way he did because a major college was paying for his living expenses. And since he was gone for 30 years, that gravy train has long left the station. If he took over custody of Dipper, he would have to go back to that college and basically explain, sorry, I was stuck wandering dimensions. Maybe that excuse would work in the 80s, as he likely had to show them his research was going somewhere, but let's see how that would turn out today. And not to mention, Stan took over Ford's life, so that entanglement is another can of worms. Why would we give you money if you spend all our money on burgle embezzlement, Mr. Pines? Stan only afforded his living expenses because of the Mystery Shack, and if there's no Mystery Shack, there's no money. So, yowza. Then there's also the issue of socializing. I know many people have a problem with it, but to me, so long as a kid is learning what they're supposed to, I don't think homeschooling is all that bad. Everybody learns differently, and some people benefit from it more than others. And besides, there's all kinds of homeschooling. It's not just sitting at the kitchen table learning through a computer. However, regardless of which path you take, there's also the social component you gotta account for. Learning how to socialize with people is one thing you cannot learn from a textbook. And since Dipper is one of the most socially awkward kids on television, maybe that would be something he should have taken into account. Considering how much of a workaholic Uncle Ford is, and again, the fact he's mostly projecting onto Dipper, I think it's pretty likely he would force Dipper to work around the clock, or at least overdo it a tad.
I did mention that the fate of the universe is at stake, didn't I?
Maybe occasionally he would get a break, but I could see Ford saying something like, Dipper, we have important work to do. That can wait. Whenever, say, Dipper wanted to stop to watch TV or to call his sister or just go hang out with somebody. And speaking of the social component, realistically, it would only be him and Ford. Yeah, they would be interacting with monsters of the week, and they would have to go into town for supplies. But I doubt Dipper would be seriously interacting with kids his own age. Now, I do think when Ford said,
When the summer's over, you give me my house back, you give me my name back, and this Mystery Shack junk is over forever.
he didn't actually mean it. It's just one of those things you say in the heat of the moment. Or he thought about it and then he changed his mind an episode or two later. But say Ford stuck to his guns. It would only be him and Dipper living at the house. Stan would be out on the streets. And Ford would have to tell Dipper why his uncle can't see him anymore. And since the Mystery Shack is no longer in business, this also removes two more people for Dipper to interact with. Seuss and Wendy. Sure, Wendy would be at school most of the time, but I can totally see her working at the shack on the weekends or after school. Seuss, that's his job, so he would always be there. With no Mystery Shack, Dipper would have to make more of an effort to see his friends. And as I described above, I could see Ford unintentionally or intentionally keeping Dipper away from Seuss and Wendy. The only other people his age that he has to interact with are Candy and Grenda, who are more Mabel's friends than his, and Pacifica. And while I think Pacifica has a great arc, and I totally ship these two, she and Dipper barely talked after that one episode. Introvert or not, isolation is not fun. Or it is. Until a certain point. Then there's also the fact I really don't think this would help Dipper's future. Dipper did tell Ford he indicated he wanted to attend college.
Beyond graduating high school with a high GPA so I can get accepted to a good technical college with a photography and media production minor to start my own ghost hunting show.
Yeah, I know what I said about homeschooling, but to a major college saying my only education after middle school was shadowing an old man, that's not gonna cut it. Especially if you don't have stuff to make up for it, like say, test scores. Ford likely isn't gonna make sure Dipper is staying up to date on subjects beyond science. Do you really want Dipper to end up at backups more? Of course he'd be a legacy student, but we all know he could totally go to Berkeley. Or Rutgers. Dipper, we would be happy to have you. I guess at this point, I should also touch on Mabel. One question I've heard people ask is, well, why couldn't Dipper tell Ford to include Mabel? Or at least ask her to stay in Gravity Falls with him? Keep in mind everything I just said. Do you really want Mabel to suffer alongside her brother? Or suffer for different reasons? Mabel would have a life in Gravity Falls, but it would be a super lonely one. At home at least. She'd be stuck in her room, while Ford and Dipper would be off doing who knows what. Do you really think Ford would include Mabel outside of the occasional task? You know what? Maybe Ford wasn't totally wrong to only ask Dipper. So yeah, I think Dipper should not have accepted the apprenticeship. Realistically, it's a poor option. Doesn't mean he couldn't do something else or video chat with Ford in California, but he was well within his rights to say no. The problem? The narrative never points any of this out except for one line.
Spend my entire teens cooped up in a basement with a lab coat? How ridiculous is that?
And because they don't, Dipper's decision seems super tacked on. The problem many people have with the plotline is more emphasis is put on the fact Dipper would be leaving Mabel, not the fact he's making a terrible decision. It seems nice on paper. Like, oh, poor Mabel, she won't have her brother, and she must have Dipper at her side, even if she's actively holding him back.
When we turn 13, the summer ends and I have to leave everything behind. You're the only person I could count on and now you're leaving me too?
Yeah, it sucks the twins will be separated, but that's the only con the show ever points out. Ever since I got to college, I've learned there's a difference between going to school and abandoning your loved ones. You're at school for a reason. That's to learn, broaden your horizons, and improve yourself. Plus, having this little thing called freedom is super duper fun. Depending on where you are or the time of year, you can go back home. You aren't a stranger. If you're homesick or just want to chat, send a text message or FaceTime or go home for dinner one night. Dipper even points out to Mabel that he had the whole thing figured out.
I won't be gone forever, okay? I'll still visit you at home and we'll chat online. We'll make it work.
I don't want it to work.
Then there's the fact of the matter of when he rejects the offer. While it works thematically, it's once again presented as one of those times Dipper has to sacrifice everything for Mabel, while she gives him little to nothing in return. Unlike before, where most of those examples are arguably minuscule, this is his future. It's like if you got an offer to go to Harvard on a full ride, but you reject it because you and your boyfriend are going to community college. Not knocking community college, it's a good option. But let's say Harvard was your dream school. Since you were a little kid, you wanted to go there, but in an act of true love, you gave gave it up. And then he dumps you a week later, drops out, and becomes a biker. And worse yet, he blocks you on Facebook. I think the writers kind of got that sense as we got this line from Mabel.
I appreciate what you said back there, but if you want to take Ford's apprenticeship, I won't get in your way.
Still doesn't work for me. Now, I am a big believer in the latter half of the show being rushed. Admittedly, Season 2B isn't as bad as most other shows. The story is wrapped up nicely with a little bow, but some side characters they don't focus on as much as they should have. Or some plot points get resolved way too quickly. Like Ford reuniting with McGucket, that was only a couple of seconds. If they got a Season 3, this would be a full episode. Yes, I know Gravity Falls ended early because Alex Hirsch suffered from burnout, but that doesn't mean I can't say the end product wasn't rushed or this problem didn't exist. I am a little more forgiving though, as I at least know there's a reason this time, but the problem is still there. It really felt like Season 2 was supposed to end with not who he seems, and Season 3 was gonna go from there, with the apprenticeship happening in Season 3's finale. If they had more time, I could see the storyline being more developed, with Dipper weighing the pros and cons. In the finished product, he learns about it in the episode before Weirdmageddon, and then 2 episodes later, they've resolved this. Sure, it's only a few days between the time Dipper learns about the offer and the time he rejects it, but episode-wise, it isn't that long. And even in universe, it's only for a couple of hours. And then the end of the world happens. Dipper deciding, oh, what should I do in my future, was likely the farthest thing from his mind when survival and hunger are more immediate concerns. I think the way one could fix this would be to have Dipper accept the offer, and Weirdmageddon becomes sort of a trial run. He could think, oh, this is what's gonna be like if I work for Grunkle Ford? I'll take my chances with public school. He never thinks about it at all during part 1. Again, because when would he have the time? And it never happens in Mabel Land because his prime focus is on saving Mabel. I have heard there was originally a deleted scene of Dipper getting a vision about how his life would turn out, or one where a version of Ford would take him on an adventure. And Dipper is into it, at least until he sees a version of Mabel in high school, all alone. The reason this got axed was they decided Mabel Lane wouldn't show him a downside to anything. Honestly, I think this would have been much better than fake Wendy seducing him. Not that fake Wendy wasn't good, but hear me out. Maybe they could have tweaked it a little bit. Have Dipper want to find Mabel, but then he meets fake Ford. Dipper, come with me. We have to find proof of Spider-Man. Dipper could feel compelled to go, but keep telling him, Ford, we gotta go back. No, Dipper, just 5 more minutes. We're almost done. Please, Great Uncle Ford, we have to find Mabel. Dipper, we're on the brink of discovery. You can't leave now. Perhaps all the while he could have fun, but also be super exhausted. Okay, we found Spider-Man and Great Uncle Ford, and we put him in the journal. Now can we go find Mabel? Don't be ridiculous, Dipper. Now we have to find the mystery of yellow-flavored M&Ms. Dipper could realize, wait, it's gonna be like this if I accept the offer? I'm gonna spend my teens in a lab coat in Ford's basement, working all day? We'll be doing this every day? Yeah, maybe this isn't such a good idea. That way, Dipper's decision at the trial wouldn't seem so forced, and he could decide himself that it isn't a good idea. Not just because he'd abandoned Mabel, but because this really isn't a job for a child. He should get the chance to grow up, and as a bonus, he should have Mabel right there with him. So in conclusion, even if this might disappoint you guys, I think the apprenticeship was a bad idea, and Dipper 100% should have said no. Maybe if he was a little older, that would be one thing, but truthfully, it would be a great comedy of errors if he went ahead with it. Doesn't excuse the fact there were certain writing problems, however. Like many of its kind in Season 2B, this plotline could have been better fleshed out, and the show needed to do more to portray it as wrong. Outside of how it affects Dipper's sister, how does it affect Dipper himself? Nice idea, but lackluster execution. As it stands, it is a contentious topic, but I hope you guys at least saw things from my perspective.